Breaking news. The town of Edgewood has finally decided to hold a special election on the ballot question to change the form of government for the town of Edgewood to the commission manager model in August of 2020, like we've been requesting for some time. Welcome to the latest edition of the Core podcast series. Today is May 29th, 2020, and I am Adrian Terry. I'm joined once again by Jerry Powers, Bryce Simons, and Karen Kiser. Welcome, everybody. So, Jerry, we had a town council meeting last night, and we had one on Tuesday. So 2 council meetings in 1 week. That's a change.
Yeah, it's a big change, and it was a strange maneuver. The meeting on the 13th of May, we thought was going to be where they finally corrected their mistake, and they had tried to push off the special election that we and the citizens petitioned for. It's supposed to be held in August. They voted to push it off to November. The Secretary of State, who is the chief election officer, came out with a letter on May 1st at our request, directing them that they must hold the election in August. And then everything kind of went dark in town hall. Nobody could get a hold of the mayor. The 2 counselors that are for the rule of law, Sherry Abrams and Councilor Jaramillo, both tried to get a hold of the mayor and the other counselors to put it on the agenda for the 13th meeting. And instead, he canceled that meeting.
And just by way of background, there was a petition that was circulated to change the form of government for the town of Edgewood. And the purpose of this change is to afford citizens greater rights than they have today and to prevent us from tyrannical government by a mayor who's out of control as we have in the current situation. And that petition was submitted to the town in March. It was certified by the town clerk in April, and it actually took a piece of litigation filed by 2 of the town councilors against the remainder of the governing body in order to get this election scheduled.
Yeah, and after canceling the meeting on the 13th, where it could have been put on the agenda, and there are some deadlines. There were deadlines coming up in early June where it would absolutely blow any possibility of them following the law and holding the election. So we felt like they were trying to wait out the clock because all of a sudden, nobody can get a hold of the mayor. He's not returning the other counselors' phone calls. Somehow it got out that he was going to have some kind of meeting with the Secretary of State by Zoom. The other 2 counselors wanted to participate in that and just got shut out completely. So they finally did resort to having to ask a judge to order that the election be held. So the judge did order the election and sent that direction to Mayor Bassett and the council. That was never even communicated to the other councilors. It's amazing that they are being absolutely shut out of government. And it's totally inappropriate, and it's inefficient because more brain power and more breadth of experience makes better decisions and better government, whether it's in government or whether it's in the private sector.
No, I agree. And really, it's unfortunate that a lawsuit even needed to be filed because the statutory section at issue for this election was extraordinarily clear. And it said that this election in an even numbered year needed to be held in the months of July or August 2020. And the town did all sorts of legal maneuvering and obfuscated the issues and tried to delay that process to a time that was inappropriate for what appears to be the nefarious purpose of maintaining power and staying in office until November 2021.
Right, and the purpose of CORE and the reason CORE was even formed was, of course, for transparency and openness, responsible government in Edgewood. And this is just the absolute opposite of that. It's extraordinary that a judge had to order a town to hold an election, and that is so, as you put it, so simply outlined in the law as a requirement that had to happen. So it's unsettling to think that our government in Edgewood is so far off the rails. You know, CORE adopted the logo of the train going off the track. It's even on fire. But we've realized after we keep turning up more information and watching the behavior of the government here, that train should be exploding, not just on fire and off the rails, because there's so much going on that is not appropriate. They're not following Robert's Rules of Order anymore. They're shutting down counselors, talking over them, calling a vote right in the middle of debate, which is just absolutely unheard of in government.
No, and we're certainly appreciative to Councilor Sherry Abraham and Councilor Audrey Jaramillo for putting their name on this lawsuit, for adding their voice to this debate, and for putting their money where their mouth is, really, to fund this litigation in order to secure the rights of the people.
Yeah, we're absolutely committed to that purpose. And that this idea of the commission manager election first came up, I believe it was at our second meeting in March, and we had got clear direction from the participants at the first forum in November of 2019. Edgewood citizens demanded we need to do something. We need to change this. This isn't right. So we did all the research, came up with this as a solution, and definitely it is going to make a huge difference in being able to keep the power from being abused and so concentrated as it is now that they just run over the other commission counselors. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to talking about the commission manager form of government. We're going to hold a Zoom public forum. This will be the first time that we've done that. The last two were at Legacy Church in person, but with COVID going around, we're going to have to hold it through a Zoom format. So I'm looking forward to that and getting more information out. But this is a perfect example of why we need to change the form of government and desegregate power so that it can't be used as an instrument, and instead it's more reflective of what people want, and it's government of the people, by the people, and for the people.
Yeah, Jerry, I think it's also important to note that at this point in time, due to the existing governmental rules and regulations, that many of the counselors are not distributed throughout the entire Edgewood community, but they're come from a clustered community, a clustered little cell within the community that doesn't represent the broader perspective of the entire community.
Yeah, that's a great point, and it's a great privilege to have your counselors actually serve within your own neighborhood, so that the town isn't just reflective of the views of certain people that may be living in a certain area.
Well, certainly mark the date. It was Tuesday, May 26th, when the town's governing body finally decided to start this ball rolling and give the citizens the opportunity to have a government that works for them.
So the other thing that happened that was really significant, there were so many things going on, but one of them was the audit got presented finally. It's been late, and we were wondering why it never came out or didn't come out on time. And Karen Kiser made some comments that were very insightful, and maybe Karen, you could help us understand what was going on with that audit.
Well, once I read the audit, which just came out in the last few days, and we can now understand why it took so long. There were a lot of findings. So there were a lot of things that the auditor had to list that weren't correct, things that need to be corrected. And I think the auditor probably had a hard time doing this 2019 audit because of all of the findings. It reached the point where instead of it being an unqualified audit opinion, which is the norm, it's now a qualified opinion, which is saying my opinion is limited by these things that aren't quite right. Specifically, our failure to list our capital assets. And you probably all remember Audrey Jaramillo pleading with the council to let her help, that we had to have inventory of our capital assets. And the mayor, I think his smart aleck response was, show me a town that's doing that. I mean, sir, it's the accounting law. Anyway, they didn't do it. And that's really what triggered that qualified opinion. Without a list of all of the assets of the town cannot keep track of them, and an auditor won't give an unqualified opinion on such a missing important piece of information.
So in your comments at the meeting, you were talking about historically how the audit, how the financials and the way the finances are being managed in Edgewood have been systematically going downhill, and you rated them on a kind of a grade. Can you tell us about that?
I can. Well, once I read this latest audit, I thought, well, how bad was it last year and the year before that? So I went all the way back to the previous mayor. And I looked at the 2014 and 15 audits, which would have been under Mayor Hill. And his audits were perfect, literally. They were unqualified opinions. They had zero findings. And I mean, if you were going to give them a grade, they were A+ audits. So along comes Bassett in 2016. And right out of the gate, his first audit had 2 findings. But that's reasonable. So maybe he was a B+. Then next year, he had another finding. We're up to 3. By 2018, the audit before this one, we had 4 findings. And yeah, it's probably by then you're down to a C. And at that point, he had a counselor who's a brilliant governmental auditor seated on the governing body. Did he turn to Audrey and say, can you help me? No. And when the audit is over, you pick a group to go into an exit conference. And it's the mayor and the clerk, and he invites a counselor. Did he invite Audrey? No. He picked Linda Hawley in 2018. And now in 2019, he asked John Abrams. And I'm pretty sure neither of them know much about auditing, but Audrey Jaramillo is really a respected expert in the field throughout the state of New Mexico. So it makes you wonder, why wouldn't you ask for help from that member of the council?
Yeah, in fact, if you don't invite people with all of the expertise in that field, it makes you really wonder if something nefarious is going on. And obviously, we've uncovered so much already that that's already a given. But it seems like an attempt to cover up when you have somebody who's an internet manager, an IT manager, attending a financial audit exit, and there's zero experience in that field. And Audrey specializes in government audits. And I just want to point this out, like if you're giving it a grade, like Brad Hill's audits, meaning the way they manage their finances, I want the audience to understand an audit is just a reflection of how well or poorly they're managing their finances. So if you were to you gave A+ to Brad Hill's administration, what would you give this administration this year?
I'd give them a D.
Yeah.
I'd give them a D. And at the rate we're going, I expect an F next year. We don't seem to care about the quality of the financial reports, or again, it's maybe not following the law, but it's following rules. You have to follow the governmental accounting rules, and the mayor and Juan seem to prefer to ignore them.
Something else happened at that meeting, or came to light, and has been coming to light over the last few weeks from the work of some of our members. Tom Miguel has looked into the management of the sewer plant, or mismanagement of it. And there were some pretty astounding things that came out of that fit with this theme of how poorly the town is being managed, whether it's finances, whether it's obeying the law and doing what they have to do to hold an election when the public petitions for it. But in this case, it goes to health as well, because in November and October, November of 2019, the sewage plant reports came out, and the ones that went from the laboratory, that came out from the laboratory and went to the New Mexico Environment Department, clearly showed that the level of contaminants or pollutants in the sewage plant discharge was almost 1,100 times over the legal limit, which I've never heard of that before. There have been children that have been killed and died after being exposed to sewer plant effluent that wasn't nearly anywhere near that bad. So the unsettling thing about it, though, was that the council gets a report, and in those months, instead of reporting exactly what was on the pollutant list and how far over it had gone, they actually reported it at less than 1 part. The legal limit is 23 parts per I think it's per milliliter, and they were at 24,000, but it got reported as less than 1. So that was 2 months in a row that those forms were altered to not reflect reality. And then all the reporting stopped. They stopped reporting to the council. They reported month by month by month and quarterly, and they stopped reporting to the council. So you can only think, I mean, what does that leave you to think? But even if you don't think about the intentional misleading of the council or hiding and concealing a problem, what about just the mismanagement? And these are the people that want to take over the drinking water in this town. I mean, that's a frightening idea.
Might be worth noting also, Jerry, if we back up a little bit more in history, the town wasn't reporting anything at all about the testing that was going on at the sewage treatment plant until Sherry Abraham raised a significant issue, creating a substantial debate within the town council. Several of us testified at the public hearing for that, and it was only after that that these doctored reports began to appear, and they were very marginal to begin with. They were very unprofessional and they were very incomplete, and it's only been getting worse from there until we discovered this discrepancy you just described.
Right, and in doing the research, Tom McGill found that there were NMED violations that were supposed to be cured in a very short window, and some of them took a couple of years. Some of them still aren't completed. And this is 4 years of this administration. So during that same time, I don't know, but I'm going to check on this and to be sure, but I believe EPCOR probably hasn't had a single NMED or Environment Department violation. I don't want these people that can't manage the sewage effluent any better than this to take over the water system. And not to mention the costs of doing it, but you just don't want, this is a critical item. It relates to health. You don't want that somebody that can't manage that kind of operation taking over the drinking water.
Who prepared this report with the incorrect information on it?
We don't know. We just know that the laboratory results and what got reported to the Environment Department were accurate, but what got reported to the council was completely inaccurate. And the really strange part of it is a lot of the values were reported accurately, but the ones that were really, really out of range and over the limits were reported as within the legal limit. That's the month when everything went haywire, actually, now that I think about it. October and November and December, and then we just got the reports. NMED, because of what Tom has reported to MAD, worked with them, given them information, they got concerned, and they told the town they needed to put all of the laboratory results or actual reports, not the ones that they make up for the council, on the website. So we've now seen them. Those pollutants are still not in range. They're still outside the envelope all the way through, I think, March and April. May, maybe April or May was in range. But it's a temporary Band-Aid solution they're using to get it there. They're just throwing chlorine in and rather than fixing the filtering of the plant.
It seems any report should have to have the date that it's prepared and by whom it's prepared. I mean, I can't imagine just handing numbers off to the council. It has to be someone operating the wastewater plant that prepared the report. I do think Mike Butler was long gone to Los Alamos by then, and I'd have to look at the date of when he left, but would it not be the man that works alone over at the plant? Is he a report preparer?
Probably he's the sampler.
Yeah.
So I would think if he's taking the sample, he'd also be recording the data, and maybe just someone else typed it up for him, but.
Well, it would all be speculation at this point, but we will find out sooner or later through the legal actions, depositions, subpoenas. We'll find out who did that.
Well, another important note that was disclosed in the town's meeting was the amount of legal bills that they've spent toward the EPCOR condemnation in the month of April 2020, which totaled $23,432.94. For those who are keeping track, according to an email from the town clerk in December 2019 to you, Karen, that the town had spent $38,000 in change in legal fees up to that date. If you add the $27,000 in change that they spent since the beginning of this calendar year, the total for legal fees, $65,893.29. Total spent on EPCOR, including the preliminary engineering report and the preliminary appraisal, total $116,000 in change. That's a lot of money. And to date, from the attorneys for that $65,000, the only work product that we've seen is a 2-page letter to EPCOR saying that they want to condemn the water system.
Yeah, so, you know, the bottom line that I'm getting from all of this is as more and more has come out, it's now becoming apparent to me why the government has been so closed, why they wanted to shut down public dissent and inquiry and open discussion and debate. Because if you get it, all of this would come out. Well, it's been like pulling teeth, but we've been managed to get this information. And it gets worse as I see more and more of what's coming out, which only emphasizes why we need the remedies that we are working toward, one of which is the commission manager change in government, to allow more decentralization of power and to have an open process where any counselor can put an item on the agenda. The way it is now, that only the mayor can put an item on. So we don't hear about the very things we need to hear about the most.
Correct, correct. I think it's a striking comparison between the current form of government and the commission manager form of government, because you do get this greater openness, you get greater equality and therefore democracy among the members of the governing body, and you add 3 critical citizen rights that we don't have now: the right to recall, the right to initiative, and the right to referendum, to get rid of ordinances that we don't think are appropriate.
Yeah, it's a great thing. So we will be holding another Zoom meetings and we'll be announcing that soon. So I want the audience to stay tuned. We always, as always, we appreciate the support. I know this COVID thing has been a huge distraction for everybody, but the timelines that we're operating under with the town in order to affect the change we need to are fixed timelines, and we need to respond during this time. So we're doing everything we can, and we appreciate your support and participation.
Again, Citizens for an Open and Responsible Edgewood, bringing you the local information that you need to know. Stay tuned, and we'll keep broadcasting. Thank you very much.